If we're honest with one another, some cars have a great reputation for reliability, and some, not so much. But whether you care to accept it or not, it's 2024, so we have to ask ourselves a very prudent question. Are those reputations of challenging reliability still valid? So yes, an incredibly obvious question for car folks like you and I, but less so for folks who want something practical in an SUV wrapper, but something that's very fancy. Now let's get something out of the way right at the top. This, very attractive, far more attractive than it should be considering it's a baby buggy. But what baby buggy is it? It's the Range Rover Velar. You and I actually have never driven this together before, because it's a baby buggy and we've driven too many. But while you and I haven't been paying attention, Range Rover, they have updated it. So it's slightly different. So we're going to answer the question, A, what it's like to live with something like this, but most importantly, is that reputation of Range Rover reliability, does it still stand in 2024? Now, obviously, we have to ask the question about the engine. Now, previously, these were on offer with a 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, and an 8-cylinder, depending on the region of the world you were in. Here, it's only on offer, meaning the US, now is a 4-cylinder turbo, 6-cylinder turbo with a mild hybrid system, which this is. And that should sound familiar to you because we've driven, Defenders and Range Rovers with the same power plant, but this car is smaller, so it should have an interesting result. Comes only as all-wheel drive, and most importantly, while it's technically badged a Range Rover, it shares a platform with the Jaguar SUV, so it is a rear-wheel drive-based SUV, so not like the Evoque. Now that means we actually have to get behind the wheel to understand what it's like to drive and live with it, but before we do that, a favor. If you see value in these episodes, I would greatly appreciate you clicking subscribe, notifications, but most importantly, share these episodes with your friends. Why? The YouTube algorithm, a complete bitch. Thank you very much. No, this is not as heavy as a full-fat Range Rover. In fact, it's quite a bit less weight, 4,200 pounds, right about there, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,905 kilograms. With that, 3,000 RPM. That actually goes. Let's try to beat this Cayenne behind us. You don't get a lot of grunt from the get-go, but when you get above 3,000 RPM, the thing really takes off. It sounds like a diesel, and more importantly, you notice it here more than other Land Rovers and Range Rovers, it's a rougher engine. It doesn't feel supple. It doesn't have that Range Rover feel to it. Not a bad engine. It just doesn't fit the personality of a Range Rover, more so here than in other applications. And yes, now it's time for us to broach that topic, reliability. And here I know what you're all thinking, and I thought it too. However, I have a number of friends that have different Range Rovers and Land Rovers. So really we're going to answer this not just for the Velar, but also what about other Range Rovers and Land Rovers? And here's the headline here. The news is not as bad as you think. So the Lucas Electronics thing from like back in the 60s with Jaguars, that's no longer a thing. The problems that I've seen with vehicles that friends of mine own, it goes wrong in like the first 6 months, and then you bring it to a place like this and they fix it or give you another one free of charge. However, when they get older, that's when they have problems, but again, not what you think. Now the vehicle we're driving today, a lot of them are on coils, early ones were on air ride. That's when we get into trouble. So like Range Rovers with air ride, after about 100,000 miles, God help you, because it's many $1,000s a corner to fix that, and that's when the warranty has completely expired. So in reality, we should be updating Range Rover and Land Rover reliability to kind of what one expects from a Mercedes, a BMW, probably better than an Audi, because I have friends with Audis. Every one of the 4 cylinders they blow up right after the warranty and Audi does nothing for them. So you're gonna pay a lot of money if you own one of these things past the warranty. Then while I have you, this is a mild hybrid, right? I wouldn't believe that from the fuel economy, because this vehicle's doing worse than the Defenders we've driven. The Defenders, we've got like low 20s driving it around town. Here I'm doing somewhere between 18 and 20 mpg. I expected better. So this is normally the point of our discussion, even in our Living With episodes where we talk about driving dynamics. This really isn't a discussion about how it drives. This is more about how it rides. And there, unlike the delivery of power, very much lives up to being a Range Rover. I would argue more so in some cases than other Range Rovers. This is more softly sprung. This isn't something like a Defender. It feels a little bit stiffer. It feels European. This, dare I say, almost feels like an old Buick, and that's not a bad thing. There's a kind of float to the way this thing rides, in that it may not sound like a luxury car, but those that are in the car with you, as well as you spending time with it, will realize it looks like a crossover, but it absolutely is a luxury car, and everything kind of backs it up. The steering is lighter than most other crossovers that are about this same size. It doesn't have this very hurried or immediate feel about the way it drives. You get behind the wheel, and unlike other Range Rovers where you feel like you have climbed the top of Macho Mountain in the way they drive, this, you feel like you're a new manager, that you've been promoted and you no longer are late to things, you're just held up. No, it is not that time to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, because maybe we should invent a new game called the opportunity cost game. You see, this has a base price of about 70,000 US, actually 70,600 US for this one with the mild hybrid 6, kind of middle of the road SE model. It has some options fitted to it, head-up display, called weather package. That color is about $1,500. It's gray. I don't know why we'd pay extra for the German rainbow. So this one is just over 80,000 US in base price, which for the life of me, I don't think I would buy that from a Land Rover or Range Rover showroom. I probably would want something like this. But put me aside, let's think about the kind of people that would buy something like this. Someone that wants something pretty but practical. This is something that is smaller. But at 80 grand, one can have a BMW X7 for 81,000. Granted, it's the base one, but the base one comes pretty well equipped. But then there is the Mercedes GLS, which is kind of the gold standard in that larger segment. It is more money, 87,000 US. Now, you guys know how I feel about debt, but the reality is, people who acquire these, they don't buy them. They lease them. Vast majority of these things are leased. Like, for example, BMWs and Mercedes, like GLSs and X7s, it's like 85%, maybe 80% lease on those vehicles. Just as an aside, a Mercedes-Benz station wagon, it's less than 20% leased, and the majority of people write a check for those cars. They do not finance them. Anyway, back to this. Land Rovers, Range Rovers, the lease versus buy percentage, it's crazy off the charts. It's in like the mid 90s, which tells you that people don't see them as valuable as 80,000 US. I would see this vehicle more comparable to like a $60,000 vehicle. But let's get back to our opportunity cost game and ask ourselves, what does it cost to lease that? The current specials that I've seen here in the Los Angeles area is about 800 US a month with $6,000 down on a lease. You could finance it for 3.9%. I'm not trying to sell you one of these. I'm trying to show you the value of money. That is an $80,000 vehicle, okay? The BMW X7, $81,000 vehicle. To lease that, $1,200 a month with the same $8,000 down. The Mercedes, again, the gold standard, costs more. It's closer to $1,300 US a month with almost $9,000 down. So in terms of the currency that people spend to acquire a vehicle like this, meaning most of them lease, they are not equal in price. Which tells me to normal car civilians, not car folks like you and I, $80,000 might be a bridge too far. Now, why do I say that? Because there are choices beyond the traditional choices we just discussed. And then let's go back to the leasing. A BMW iX, the big electric vehicle, that can be had for $600 a month. So this is Riley. She's here to make sure I share a very important point that she wanted to get across. As you can see, it's all about her getting comfortable. Riley wanted to let you know that this is not a large SUV. It may be expensive, as we just learned, but in reality, it's about the same size as like a GLC or an X3. The wheelbase, where you would package a lot of people and a lot of dogs, it's within millimeters of those vehicles, and they are significantly cheaper. So as you can see here, she's not particularly happy with the back of this vehicle because she's, what, about 60, 65 pounds, and she is 100%, I know you're a sweetheart and you're beautiful. Yes, you are. Oh, there's something else she wanted me to share with you. Now, if one's going to live with a vehicle like this, one needs to understand the realities of the Velar and the currency of crossovers. It's not something you're going to put a lot of people in the back. I mean, yeah, this is where a 6-footer would sit, but in reality, yeah, I can put my knees back here, but it's not something I would call spacious. If I were to put it on like a spectrum of, say, spaciousness and usability over here, and occasional use over here, this is definitely in the middle of that spectrum. That said, really what this is about is the beauty. We've been hitting this theme throughout this entire episode. Now, there's a couple of areas where it does fall down on the inside, doesn't live up to that promise of beauty. One of them is tactile feel, like the top of the door panels, even the bottom of the door panels. Not something we've come to expect, especially in newer Range Rovers, because this is something that they've changed drastically with this latest generation of Range Rover and Range Rover Sport. This one does have a dash. We've seen this theme with other Range Rovers. They've updated the UX here where it's got the same like Pivo infotainment screen, which generally is a very good thing. However, in this application, they're missing something, and I think this is the biggest miss. They don't have those rotating knobs for the temperature control that are like double use with the heated and cooled seat as well as the fan speed. And most importantly, there isn't a knob for the volume. Yeah, one can use the steering wheel control, but there's something missing, because one of the things that sets this whole system apart, which I would say is like second only to the BMW iDrive system, are those rotating knobs and some of the toggle switches. So other than that, wonderful place to be. So this is the point of the episode where I would normally ask, what have we learned today? And I would argue, if you and I are honest with ourselves, meaning the car person of our group of friends, we've known for a long time that Land Rovers, Range Rovers, they get a bad rap on reliability that is no longer valid. Yeah, they do stupid things like other fancy SUVs and luxury cars that after 100,000 miles, God help you if you own it past the warranty. You're going to pay $4,000 a corner for the air ride or something ridiculous like that. Which brings us to a nasty rumor I've heard about these vehicles. So Land Rover has said that the smaller vehicles, whether it be Land Rover or Range Rover, they are going to switch to an all-electric platform, meaning after 2025, don't quote me on this part, they said that the Velar, the Evoque, and the Land Rover Discovery Sport are going to move to an EV skateboard, which is going to underpin a bunch of new Jaguars as well. We'll get more details of that in the future, but basically, this is kind of the last hurrah, at least what Jaguar Land Rover is telling us about gasoline inside of a smaller Range Rover. Hopefully they don't take that out of real Range Rovers. I don't think they will, because the market is changing. That's something we'll discuss in a very different episode. That brings us to the wish list. And here, the only thing I have to say, really two things. Number one, the suspension. Can we make those more reliable, less craziness with the air ride that costs a ridiculous amount of money on all four corners? And then number two, if we're doing this EV thing on the small cars, can we take a page out of the BMW book, not the Mercedes book, where they made it a BMW first, then an electric car? Can we do the same thing here? And then I'm going to ask for something else in terms of comments here. What has been your experience in terms of reliability with these things? What have your friends told you? If you own vehicles like this, not just a Velar, this was looking at all Range Rovers today. Have you seen craziness that I haven't shared with you today? Or has it been kind of what I'm seeing amongst my group of friends and what I've seen over the internet? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoMan TV all one word, MotoMan TV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Now before I let you go, I am standing in this hangar for a very specific reason. This plane, if you are a football fan, should look familiar because it flew over the Rose Bowl on January 1st of 2024. Now, why is that important? For the first time ever, a civilian formation flying team flew over the Rose Bowl, not the military. And yes, that formation flying team, the Tiger Squadron, based here at Torrance Airport. If you find these kind of planes interesting, you can check out this episode where we flew 6 of these across the country to the largest air show in the world. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.